So, a new policy from the US government is changing the rules for some international visitors. It's called a visa bond program. This program requires certain people applying for a temporary US visa to pay a large, refundable deposit. Now, this isn't a fee you pay to get the visa, it's more like a security deposit. The government holds on to this money to make sure you leave the country when your visa says you have to. If you follow the rules and depart on time, you get your money back. But if you overstay, the US government keeps the bond. This idea has been introduced as a way to address the issue of people remaining in the US after their legal permission to stay has ended. The introduction of this policy stems from an executive order signed by President Donald Trump in January 2025. The order, titled "Protecting the American People Against Invasion," called for much stricter enforcement of immigration laws. One of the key goals was to reduce the number of visa overstays. A visa overstay happens when a foreign national enters the US legally on a temporary visa, like for tourism or business, but does not leave before the visa's expiration date. The US Department of Homeland Security reported that in the 2023 fiscal year, there were over 565,000 such cases, which represents about 1.45% of all temporary admissions. The government sees this visa bond as a tool with two main purposes. First, it acts as a financial incentive to ensure compliance with immigration laws. The prospect of losing thousands of dollars is a powerful motivator for travelers to adhere to the terms of their visa. Second, it serves as a diplomatic signal. By targeting countries with high overstay rates, the US hopes to pressure those governments into doing more to screen their own citizens before they apply for a US visa. The administration frames it as a common-sense measure designed to protect the integrity of the US immigration system and enforce existing laws more effectively. For travelers, this policy adds a significant new step and a major financial consideration to the already complex process of applying for a US visa. Instead of just proving they have ties to their home country and the funds for their trip, some applicants will now also need to find thousands of dollars for a bond. This amount, ranging from $5,000 to $15,000, is a substantial sum, especially for people from developing nations. The policy is being rolled out as a pilot program, meaning its effects will be studied over the next year to determine if it should be continued, expanded, or changed. The mechanics of the visa bond program are straightforward, but honestly create a high barrier for affected applicants. During the standard visa interview at a US embassy or consulate, a consular officer will decide if a bond is required. This decision is based on the applicant's home country and the officer's assessment of the risk that the individual might overstay their visa. If a bond is required, the applicant must pay the specified amount, $5,000, $10,000 or $15,000, before the visa will be issued. The money is held by the US government as a guarantee. The program is designed to be refundable under specific conditions. If the traveler visits the US and leaves before their visa expires, the bond is returned in full. The bond is also refunded if the traveler decides not to make the trip, if their visa is cancelled, or if they are denied entry at a US port of entry. However, the government keeps the entire bond amount if the person overstays their visa, even by a single day. The same is true if the individual applies for asylum or any other form of immigration status after arriving in the United States, as this is seen as a violation of the terms of their temporary visitor visa. Initially, the program is targeting a small number of countries identified as having high rates of visa overstays. As of August 2025, the policy applies to citizens of Malawi and Zambia. According to the Department of Homeland Security's 2024 report, these countries had visa overstay rates of 14.3% and 11.1% respectively in the previous fiscal year. These figures are significantly higher than the overall average, which is why they were chosen for the initial phase of the pilot program. The policy specifically targets B1, which is business, and B2, which is tourism, visa applicants from these nations. While only 2 countries are affected now, the list could grow. The State Department has indicated that the program is designed to be flexible and could be expanded to include other nations with similarly high overstay statistics. US government reports have previously mentioned countries like Chad, Laos, Haiti, Congo, Eritrea, Myanmar, Yemen, Burundi, Djibouti, and Togo as having high overstay rates. It's important to note that this policy does not affect citizens from the 40-plus countries in the visa waiver program who can travel to the US for up to 90 days without a visa. The timeline for this new immigration enforcement strategy has moved quickly. The foundation was laid in January 2025 when President Trump signed the executive order. The visa bond pilot program itself was officially announced in August 2025, giving travelers and governments little time to prepare. The most immediate deadline is August 20th, 2025, the date when the bond requirement officially takes effect for visa applicants from Malawi and Zambia. The pilot program is scheduled to run for 12 months, concluding in August 2026, at which point the government will evaluate its success and decide on its future. Adding to the financial burden is a separate new fee that will affect a much broader group of travelers. In a tax and spending bill passed in July 2025, Congress introduced a $250 visa integrity fee. This fee will be charged for many non-immigrant visa approvals and is scheduled to become effective on October 1st, 2025. Unlike the visa bond, this fee is not limited to specific countries. It's intended to cover the administrative costs of ensuring visa compliance. While there is discussion that this fee might be reimbursable for travelers who comply with their visa terms, the details of how that would work have not yet been fully clarified. Together, the bond and the new fee represent a significant increase in the cost of visiting the United States. For an applicant from Malawi or Zambia, the total upfront cost could now include the standard visa application fee, the $250 visa integrity fee, and a bond of up to $15,000. Critics argue this creates a two-tiered system of travel, where only the wealthy can afford to visit the US for many families hoping to visit relatives, students planning short-term studies, or business people seeking to build trade relationships. Raising such a large sum of money will be a nearly impossible task, effectively closing the door to the United States. These financial hurdles are raising concerns within the US tourism industry. Organizations like the US Travel Association have warned that these policies could deter legitimate travelers and harm the American economy. International tourism is a major industry bringing in over $200 billion in annual spending. Some early data may already reflect a negative impact. For example, Las Vegas reported an 11% year-over-year drop in visitation in June 2025. The fear is that making travel to the US more expensive and complicated will push tourists and business travelers to choose other, more welcoming destinations. The US government defends the visa bond program as a necessary and targeted measure to enforce immigration laws. Officials argue that visa overstays undermine the legal immigration system and can pose a national security risk. From their perspective, the bond is not a punishment, but a practical tool to ensure that temporary visitors are, in fact, temporary. They point to the high overstay rates from specific countries as evidence that a stronger deterrent is needed. The administration insists this is a common-sense approach that holds individuals accountable and encourages foreign governments to take responsibility for their citizens. However, critics have fiercely condemned the policy. Immigrant rights organizations like the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, have called it a legalized shakedown that is fundamentally discriminatory. They argue that it unfairly targets people from poorer, predominantly African nations, creating a system where the ability to travel is based on wealth rather than merit. Policy experts from the Cato Institute have described the bond as draconian, predicting it will be an insurmountable obstacle for many legitimate travelers, including those wishing to visit family members who are US citizens. They see it as a blunt instrument that punishes the many for the actions of a few. The debate extends to the economic implications. While the government focuses on the costs of illegal immigration, critics highlight the economic benefits of international travel. They argue that the policy is short-sighted, as the revenue lost from deterred tourists and business travelers could far outweigh any money collected from forfeited bonds. Every international visitor spends money on hotels, food, transportation, and attractions, supporting American jobs and businesses. By making the US seem less welcoming, these policies could inflict long-term damage on its reputation as a global destination for commerce and tourism. For travelers from Malawi, Zambia, and other countries that may be added to the list, the key takeaway is to be prepared. When applying for a B1 or B2 visa, you must now consider the possibility of needing to pay a substantial bond. It is more important than ever to provide strong evidence of your ties to your home country, such as stable employment, property ownership, and family connections, to convince the consular officer that you intend to return. You should also be prepared financially, understanding that even if you are a legitimate traveler, you may be required to secure thousands of dollars to make your trip a reality.